Welcome to AI Everywhere Leaders Podcast, where we explore real-world applications of artificial intelligence and their impact on business leadership. I'm your host, Adriana, and today we're exploring how cloud-first AI strategies are revolutionizing digital transformation and reshaping the future of work through cutting-edge technologies like digital twins. With us today is Dave Ducat, Managing Partner of Storm Reply, USA division. Storm Reply is a global AWS Premier Consulting Partner with over a decade of experience, helping enterprises navigate complex digital transformations. With more than 400 certifications and over 130 AWS projects completed in the last 2 years alone, Dave and his team are at the forefront of AI digital transformation, enabling AI innovation, specializing in everything from big data, IoT to cybersecurity and emerging digital twin technologies. Dave, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Dave, before we dive into the technical aspects, can you please paint a picture for our listeners of what you're seeing in terms of how AI and cloud technologies are fundamentally changing business operation?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is a relook at business process, right? If you think about AI, you think about how AI has been really almost exclusively, at least in the early days of AI, have been focused primarily on information gathering and information parsing, to now we're actually seeing AI being used in the middle of business process to inform humans, to then have humans be able to make intelligent decisions about changing process in real time, making business more agile, doing the things that need to be done, which is really what AI was intended to do along the way. We just had to do a little bit of work to get there. Now we're seeing that actually being put into practice, and we're seeing people start to get some of the real value out of AI in process versus just simply using it as a fancy chat or a fancy search engine.
Let's start with the state of AI-driven digital transformation today. From your work with Storm Reply in the United States and your experience as an AWS Premier Consulting Partner, how are enterprises today currently approaching the integration of AI into their cloud strategies?
Well, a couple of things. I think if you think about the Gartner hype cycle, right? It's something that's very common that we see in the industry, and a lot of us formulate and use kind of as our guide, if you will. We're at we peaked, and then we're now at what's called the trough of disillusionment, right? So there was a series of things that happened with AI. There was a series of things that happened around, again, as I sort of alluded to before, AI being used for very, very tactical things, hyper search engines, some, development of content, some things like that. What we're seeing now, I think, is we're starting to see the real, pardon the term, where the rubber meets the road. We're really seeing the impact of people realizing that every technology decision, regardless of whether it's AI or it's cloud computing or anything else, has to have a real ROI. So what we're seeing, as I suggested before, is that we're starting to see people really look at business process and transforming not only the business process, but transforming the business with AI, and particularly things like in marketing automation is a great example, where you have hyper-focused prompting now that's highly personalized, highly direct, creating content that's directly for individuals, let alone classes of people or demographics, et cetera. You're having these prompts that are being engineered on the fly. They're being driven through relatively straightforward, platforms. Granted, there are the platforms out there like HubSpot and others that do lots of things, but you're seeing even folks just using the tools that we provide in the AWS world, to do incredible things. We have a customer, for example, that we've helped them build an entire end-to-end marketing automation capability simply by entering prompts, well-formed prompts into a form, and churning out content across all digital channels, social channels, print, everything else. So I think you're starting to see, and this is what we've been working with our customers on, is really making AI real for people and not just, a novelty or something that maybe helps one person or a group of people do one thing. We're seeing it start to help companies do their thing.
I like how you explained the kind of 360 degrees approach, integrating digital with print and showcasing the ROI. Speaking of different industries, do you see any variations in how different sectors are approaching the AI cloud integration?
Sure. I think, when we talk about industries, I mentioned marketing because marketing is generally, not to be offensive to marketers, but it's somewhat the Wild West, right? You can pretty much do what you want. And the differentiation of marketing entities is how well do they differentiate themselves from each other, right? It's how well do they present themselves to their customer base. But if you look at highly regulated industries like financial services or utilities or public sector, there's been a much slower adoption across a broader section, right? There's still been that, for lack of a better term, kicking the tires, try to find ways to use AI, constructively in the business. I mean, financial services, of course, has been using AI for fraud detection for a long time, but it's not really used it in the customer service angle, right? Because there's a lot of danger in hallucination. There's a lot of danger in using data that's not fully formed. There's a lot of danger in exposing data, for that lack of a better term, unintentionally or unnecessarily. Highly regulated industries, financial services, healthcare, public sector, utilities, I think have adopted it more slowly, but they're starting to pick up the pace now. We're seeing a lot more interest in general across those particular industries than we had probably 6 months ago.
Excellent. Great to hear that. From a technology architecture perspective, what are the key components of a successful cloud-first AI strategy? And I'm asking this question mainly because I've seen AWS has been releasing lots of new tools and lots of new systems, especially when we look at agentic AI. So from the technology architecture perspective, what do you see as key components for a successful cloud-first AI strategy?
Sure. I think it's a little cheeky about what I'm going to say here, but AWS provides you the best of all worlds, right? On one hand, it provides you with a set of capable tools in its own platform, right? Bedrock and other tools in the AWS footprint alone are very substantial in the marketplace, both from a capability and from a cost perspective. But what AWS has really decided to do, I think, is take the right approach, which is it's giving you a window into every AI tool for the most part. Now, especially with the most recent announcements with the alignment of OpenAI, now you have pretty much every major, or at least every well-recognized tool, with the exception of possibly Gemini from Google. But I mean, you have every tool set available to you to use as you choose to use it. So you don't have to put your eggs in proverbial AI basket. You can use, again, a large percentage of companies in the world use AWS in some way, shape, or form. You can use the interface to almost virtually any AI backend you want. So what that does is it allows you to test, it allows you to try out, allows you to broker. I mean, there's a number of different ways to look at it. We're helping our customers really try to not just use one system or one platform, but to use them all as they need to for the best parts of their business. That means that from a strategy perspective, really you have to focus on how the AI involves in the process versus the actual tooling that's required.
So from your experience, what should organizations be thinking then when it comes to infrastructure, like from the infrastructure point of view? Should they be interested in that, or they should just come to specialized partners, super advanced partners, like in your case, Right Reply, and not worry on the infrastructure?
Well, I don't think you can do AI in earnest without worrying about the infrastructure. I think you have to worry about the infrastructure. I think we'd be happy to help regardless of whether it's AWS related or not. I mean, we're happy to help and try to solve those problems, because at the end of the day, where I'm trying to get to here with my own customers is this is a journey about your business. This is a transformation of your business. This isn't necessarily a tool selection exercise. And so when you talk about AI as a tool or as a capability, you have to look at the entire set of business processes by themselves. Where can we make improvements in efficiency? Where can we reduce waste? Where can we cut out unnecessary steps? Where can we let tools like AI not just fill in the gaps, but actually create value, right? And then from there, we can then decide what the right tool is to do the right thing. And I fully expect, as many of us who've been around I've got a little bit of gray in my beard. I've been around for a while. We all recognize that, yeah, tools all do great things, and there's always going to be a great tool out there. But if you don't really align it to an outcome or align it to a value proposition that then drives value, it's just a tool. And I've got just like the thousands of records I have behind me, right? Those are all individual records, but if you don't play them and understand what you're listening to, then it's just the thing that you throw on a record player. So, that's kind of an esoteric example, but you get the idea that, and it's not ironic that your show here is called AI Everywhere, because really that's what it's going to be. It is going to be AI everywhere. It's just a matter of how do you get to everywhere. Everywhere means you have to look at everywhere, every place, everything, every time. And that's, I think, the biggest overall change that, to really get to the point of the question. I'm sorry for rambling, but it took me a minute there.
No, that actually makes complete sense. And I like your analogy with the vinyls. And also, I did a little dance inside when you mentioned AI everywhere, because, I didn't wake up one day saying, hey, I want to do this company AI everywhere. It was more a reflection of what happened in the last decades, really. And your analogy with the vinyls, by the way, super impressive collection. I think you have thousands there from
I
what
have
I
over
can see.
10,000, unfortunately. It's a
Yeah, that's really impressive. But I like your analogy, and you're absolutely right. I have to agree with that. It doesn't matter what tool you're using. The business aspect is more important, and what problem are you actually trying to solve more than anything. I mean, with AI before, you know, when we didn't have as much generative AI in our face, I think that was the same question 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It was always about, throughout the digital transformation, it was always about solving a business problem rather than focusing on which tool we use. Now, I want to change gears a bit, and I wanted to ask you, from your experience, what about the human element? How do you see these technology advancements? I would like to think of them as advancements. How do you see they are changing the workforce dynamics?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a difficult question because there's a lot of impact in general. Some of it's good, some of it's not good, and some of it's probably in the middle. AI is going to take jobs away. That's just the reality of it. I think we all have to accept that fact. And those jobs are going to be a variety of jobs. If you look at, the consulting industry alone, for example, right? The consulting industry over the last, let's call it year to maybe year and a half, has started shedding jobs. Why? Because one, customers aren't necessarily buying consulting services directly as they used to. And two, they're using the tools of AI to sort of supplement a lot of that knowledge that they otherwise would have gained. And so if you look at consulting just as one example, but if you look at, as we talked a little bit about before, we talked about industries that were consuming AI, like marketing and other heavy information, heavy data. Not that every industry isn't heavy data, but you get the point. They've already started in terms of, changing the way that jobs work. Whereas, as we said at the beginning of the discussion, the tools were really designed or were being implemented to make one person's job a little bit easier or to provide a specific outcome for a particular type of role. What we're going to see here coming, and it's already started, is that we're going to see whole groups of people, whole departments of people start to get either highly, tweaked or changed completely because the tools are now at a point where they can do the 95% of those jobs. As a great example, although a friend and colleague of mine likes to complain about the consumer, the customer experience industry, aka contact center. The reality is that contact centers are becoming vastly more human than human, right? They're almost to the point where they're taking these tools and they're going overboard to the point where people are getting frustrated because they're not feel like they're being heard enough. They're not feeling like they're not empathetic enough. So when we talk about AI and we talk about AI in business, it's a difficult question because people are going to be impacted, both in a positive way. They're going to be impacted in a negative way. And they're going to be impacted hopefully in a generally sort of altruistically constructive way. First, of course, we know that AI is going to take jobs. It's already happening. We're already starting to see that across a number of industries. I believe it was either the Washington Post or Gartner or somebody just reported, it might have been McKinsey even, who just reported that, a high percentage of entry-level jobs will be completely consumed by AI. And that's probably true to some degree. I think, those things are always a little bit, sensationalist, but at the end of the day, the lower effort, lower intellectual effort. I don't mean that to be negative, but the sort of more rote kinds of repeatable jobs will be taken by AI because that's why it was designed, right? I do think, though, to really put a fine point on this, there's really two things that are going to happen that I think people have to become sort of complacent with. One is that, information is going to come at them faster. And so they have to be able to consume information more quickly. They have to be able to know how to classify and validate the information if those tools don't already exist in their environment. And then they have to be able to act on that information as quickly as possible. In some cases, when we talk about agentic AI is a great example of this, right? So, today as companies are starting to use agentic AI in earnest, there's still a lot of humans in the loop because, again, we just need to crawl, walk, and run before we just turn it over to the robots, as I think Elon said. But eventually it's at a point not in the near distant future, those agentic processes will be completely agentic, meaning there won't be humans in the loop. We'll have built the trust about their outputs and outcomes so that then we have to shift the focus to the output and what we do with the output. Again, it goes back to kind of the hype cycle again. We're sort of in the trough of disillusionment right now in AI, but it's not going to be too long coming when we realize that we have the guardrails, we put those in place, we know how to use them, we trust the guardrails. And when we build the trust in the guardrails, that means we start to trust the process. When we trust the process, we can move on to the next thing, which is how do we make most efficient the output and how do we make most efficient the use of that. Then the third thing I was going to say is that there will also be, into your question about education, how do we get the people aligned to this and what do we have to do? There is a general education required. I mean, there's a general education about what it is, how it works, why it works, and more importantly, what it doesn't do, right? It doesn't do everything. It's not going to do everything. And we don't want it to do everything, right? We still want people to be responsible for some degree of accountability, for some degree of authority, because again, if we don't have those people involved, then we're literally turning everything over to the machines, and we definitely don't want to do that. There's lots of science fiction dystopian novels written about that. Let's not reinvent that wheel. But not to be again cheeky about it. The reality is that we as a consuming audience for AI will become more trusting of it one way or the other because the outputs either are validated by us, for us, or the outputs are validated to us and for us, right? And neither one of those necessarily has to be completely scary, but it's pretty scary right now because we just don't have enough exposure, enough experience, and enough success with it to feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's a very complex topic. And I appreciate you giving me such a thorough answer. Yeah, I would have so many things to discuss with you on this topic. I just think we don't have enough time today to cover all of that, especially on the lines of the dystopic movies we've hopefully all watched. So I do hope personally that it doesn't get to that and we get some sort of legislation in place for all of this. But anyhow, let's shift focus to our B2B marketing audience. Just a couple of questions around that. I know we already mentioned AI for marketing teams. So I'm really concerned about the digital transformation and the AI capabilities that become central to many companies in terms of value proposition today. So Dave, what do you think marketing professionals should understand especially about communicating cloud-first AI solutions effectively? What's your perspective on that?
Well, again, I think a couple things. One, it's not unique to marketing, but it's probably most prevalent in marketing right now because it's one of the first industries to start to really try to adopt these tools, which is this thing going to replace me? Do I need any more people? If you look at some of the largest marketing or at least creative companies in the world, right? They've got massive staffs of people, all of whom are, again, presumably are trying to find the next biggest thing for their customer. And I fully appreciate that. What is happening is that they're making that process more efficient by having the tools do a lot of the creation, the physical creation of content, the physical validation of that content, and the sourcing and surfacing of that content, right? That's usually something that was done by a very talented human or our team of humans, right? I have a friend of mine who, is he's a CRO of growth for a relatively new agency based here in the US, and her sort of remit, which I appreciate, is, she's no longer concerned about the creation aspect. She's concerned about how fast they can get it done, how fast they can get it into channels, and how fast they can get feedback from those channels to alter the content, right? So, well, I think, again, this might be a little naivete on my part, but I think, a lot of agencies, a lot of marketers in particular, were used to the big pitch. They were used to creating the campaign, the be all end all branding. All that stuff was really on the part of the marketer to really provide that insight and expertise. And I think that that's still going to be there, but I think it's going to be there more now is that there's less focus on the creative aspect of it and more focus on the effectiveness and the efficiency of it, right? Everything from A/B testing to content creation to content validation to market analysis, all that stuff is going to become really truly in a full loop, in a repeatable loop that then changes how marketers and marketing agencies come to market with that stuff, right? Instead of, I guess I said, kind of going pitch by pitch by pitch, now it's going to become more of a partnership that continues in perpetuity, that takes input constantly, like a continuous learning exercise, and then drives that back into their customer. And so I think you're going to see, and this is just personally my personal speculation, I think you're going to see the creative agencies become more like, I used HubSpot earlier, become a little bit more like a HubSpot in that they're building their own platforms to then allow their customers to consume off of their platform versus, again, a agent by agency or pitch by pitch by pitch that, again, is valuable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to anger any marketers out there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I built for AI Everywhere as a B2B tech marketing agencies. I
Yeah.
actually built a platform because I'm heading exactly in the direction you're mentioning. And for me, as a sales went marketing person, like for me, it's mind blowing the fact I can produce a video. I have a concept in my head and I can use a prompt. Okay, it's a complex prompt, but I can use a complex prompt, generate a video and showcase to my customer, this is what sort of event I want to build for you in person. And, 10, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, probably something like that, large agencies would have spent a fortune just by watching movies like Mad Men. You can see like they were strategizing how to do it, involving casting, lots of resources to actually get it done. And the fact I can learn how to prompt well and I can create that video is just, for me, it's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
wow.
Well, I alluded to this before, and there's one more thing to answer the question, I think, in a little bit of a different way, which is, and you kind of suggested it too, to the point of the advertising business, the point of the marketing business, the point of the consulting business, because it's really very much the same, is, hours spent and dollars earned, right? It's dollars for hours, if we say in the US. That also has to change. To your point about platform, right? Agencies, especially B2B, are going to have to change the way that they look at making money. And they're not going to be making money by the hours and dollars spent on a pitch, to your point. They're going to be making hours and dollars on the frequency and cycle of the things that they do and the continued value that they bring relative to that. That's not to say that they weren't doing that before, but the emphasis now is going to be on how fast, how efficient, and how impactful was that thing in the shortest amount of time. And, when you talk about platform, it made me think of something, because again, we have one of our clients we actually did this for, and we actually built their platform for their customer, and their time went from again, weeks of, profiling and content creation and testing and validation. It went from that to 4 hours or less to create a very, very detailed prompt. That prompt then went out and generated content across all channels in a matter of maybe an hour. They, pressure tested it with, internally within the organization first. Then they pushed it out to the various channels as, again, a test. And within a matter of a day, one calendar day, one business day, they were done with what they needed to do for that particular exercise, where it would have taken them 4 weeks to have done that before. So, if there's anything that's going to happen, it's going to be the demand for speed and efficiency. And there's going to be a change. If it's already seeing it, there's going to be a change in, we're just not going to pay for that creative time anymore.
Yeah, that's unfortunately, that's true. When it comes to storytelling, around storytelling for complex enterprise solution like digital twin or any advanced AI systems, how do you think marketing teams working for you, for instance, how do you think they should approach that? How should they package that? The reason why I keep asking this question, I've been asking it before during the podcast, on camera and off camera, is because I've been testing lots of tools, AI tools recently, and I was quite disappointed by the marketing review, the product marketing materials, and what the tool was actually doing. So from your past experience, what would you recommend marketing people that are actually working with, as I mentioned, digital twins or any advanced AI systems to promote them to market?
Yeah, make sure. I think I understand the question. So for me, again, I go back to what's the definition of a digital twin? A digital twin is legitimately, right, an entity, a digital entity acting on my behalf or acting as if I were acting in a set of circumstances with business rules and expected outcomes. That's, I'm paraphrasing, but that's generally what a digital twin is, right? So then the question is, how do you present that most effectively? To me, it always comes back on output and outcome, right? The tooling matters to some degree because there's again, as we've already talked about, there's a speed and efficiency and an overall cost associated with executing those things. But I still go back to, what is the thing doing? What is it really doing? And what is it doing relative to what I need it to do? So, first of all, I'm not sure anybody needs one more of me, but I mean, at the end of the day, if I have a set of tasks that I have to do that I'm responsible for, and I turn that over to a digital twin, I then have to know what that's doing. I have to know how it's doing it and why it's doing it. I have to be able to answer those questions myself as a person who is representing. And then I have to be able to answer that to someone that's working for. So as in my business, as an example, more so as a consultant, I have to know what that output is. And I have to know all the ins and outs of it today, because again, we're at a point in the history of AI where we don't always trust all the output, right? And so I think, to answer the question a little bit more succinctly, it's not the tool. We can't focus on the tool. We have to focus on the output. Here is the set of outputs. Here's how we understand what and how the business that you do as our potential customer is. We understand the role you play or the roles that are in that business. And then we build the system, platform, tooling, whatever, to emulate that, or in some cases actually execute that. And then you, as the prevailing human or humans in the loop, so to speak, are on the accountable for it, but you're also aware of what's going on at all times. You're getting dashboards, you're getting whatever the case is, right? You're seeing the steps along the way, or you're able to dig into the data. Now, I'm taking a very probably boomerish kind of view on that, but at the end of the day, we still are not, as I said, in a position, I don't think, where we trust the outputs of tools. We still have to see the visualization of those tools in action, or the outputs of the process steps that go with that. And as we get more comfortable with those, then we'll certainly let the tools run on their own. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you did. You gave me more questions. You gave me a really complex answer that kind of cascaded more questions to it, and like,
I wouldn't be a good consultant if I didn't give you more questions to ask.
Yeah. My brain works with use cases. So I don't know why, but I like to know specific examples of activities. So listening to your answers, I was thinking about the digital twins. Like, if you have your digital twin, I have my digital twin, we could literally produce this podcast just by agreeing on which topics we're going to talk about, input the text, have our video avatars, let's call them, or characters or whatever, and just drop the text and get them talk with each other based on that text, and we can have a side conversation. And probably, I wouldn't spend like 20 hours to edit and everything. And I'm using a tool that actually has AI embedded, so it helped me cleaning the audio on that a little bits and pieces. But still, I feel like for a marketing person to produce content, or even for a sales director, to produce sales training at scale, I think using tools like that, it's quite helpful. It does save lots of time. They still cost a lot, I must say. They are not cheap options to do that.
Sure.
If you don't have the human resources to do all of that, I think, yeah, it saves lots of time. Where I personally have a problem with is the fact you don't know that that's a digital twin. And I see more and more use cases, as you mentioned, in customer services. Technologically speaking, you can implement to one of your customers today an AI character that can be the replica of a human, existing human or not. That's a different conversation. But you can implement that in a customer support center and have a natural language conversation with a customer with the little accents, with whatever perks you want that AI avatar to have. Is it ethical to do that without telling the customer that he or she is talking with an avatar? Like, this is like, you see how many questions you took me on? So many. It's like,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
now, because I've seen customer, the example you gave, it's a really good one. I've seen it in the US, in the UK, and probably it's going to be globally an issue, where you get in a loop and there's no human to talk with. And it is quite frustrating. I've been losing my mind recently on one of the podcasts about the
Well,
car not
you're not
having.
alone. You're not alone. I would just add one thing, because I want to answer that question, or there's a question in there about ethics. I think, I go back and forth on that too. I struggle with it because on one hand, I think I'm a big believer in ethics. I think at the end of the day, that's where all we really have to kind of fall back on eventually is ethics. I do think that it's ethical. I think it's an ethical requirement to identify that you are using AI, and you're using AI, avatars and things in those processes. I think it's, to your point, it's better than it ever has been, and it will continue to get better to the point where we can't tell that it's AI or not. I think we have an obligation as community, as a community of practice, as a set of resources who have, again, been around a few blocks, and some of us, maybe me, have been here since before the AI winter. So, we've been doing this a long time. But I do think ethical AI is really the important piece here. That is going to also be a sales point, for AI, and then it's going to become part of the standard lexicon. I mean, it somewhat is now, but it's not necessarily a differentiator. Like, no one's going out there saying our AI is more ethical than theirs, right? That will happen eventually, because again, we'll get to a saturation point with AI where it becomes the norm, not the exception. And so then they'll be looking for other differentiators, and ethical AI will be one of them. And then cost will be the other, right? The ability to drop and bring down the per token cost, or the carbon footprint, or any number of things that are cost associated with AI. Those will be the other differentiators.
I was wondering, what's your opinion? It happened to me recently. I was in a customer call. They were not paying me. It was the discovery call. And I realized very quickly that they were actually using this device where they were recording the call without me giving any sort of consent. And they were just asking follow-up question, to the point I got a bit upset with the situation, because by answering all those questions using smart AI, customized AI, let's say, you can build your own strategies just by, if I
Absolutely.
state those ideas, 15, 20, 30 minutes, you can build your own strategy. So I was wondering, how do you feel about that? Like, because from my point of view, I would have preferred them to ask me, hey, we are recording this using this AI system. Are
Sure.
you okay with us doing that? Like, did this happen to you? What's your opinion on
Yeah,
that?
it's actually happened to me too, in a different way, a couple different ways. And what I would say is, what we're seeing, and this goes back to kind of the first part of the discussion around, buying patterns and that sort of thing, right? Consulting services, anything where we're providing information as the expert, right? That has a value. It has a price. It has a value to us as the provider. It also has a value to the consumer. The value to the consumer, I used to jokingly call it being able to answer the $200 an hour question. because, that's why you're hiring me in theory, or you're hiring my company, you're hiring my team, is because not only can we do that, we can do it more effectively and efficiently than you can. And either you need to out task that to us because we're your team and can get it done for you without having to have a lot of oversight, or you completely outsource the outcome to us and then we have to then provide the outcome, and that is what it is. That's also changing, right? And this happened to me about a month and a half ago, where I was on, we had just done some work for a customer to sort of build their proof of concept and kick the tires on some AI, and Gen AI, particularly is in a kind of a similar thing we've been talking about. They were a workforce management platform, right? And not the big one that everybody knows, but but it's a similar idea. And they listened to us. We went through the results, and we came back to them and presented them with the follow-on work. Let's take this from POC to production. Here's the things we need to do. Here's how we're going to help you do that. And they literally had an AI agent in the room taking notes, ding, 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 taking notes, and they were.
Yeah.
Then they went and ran it through various other tools and said, okay, we're just going to do it on our own. And we're like, wait, what? You don't have the experience and data, because they were making these very unfortunate mistakes in working with data and how they were working data and exposing data and all those other things. And it's like, well, we're just going to do it on our own. And it comes to find out that they had run through a number of different tools, and they've built a bunch of scripting and a bunch of other things right there on the fly, and that they felt like they could just go and implement it and it was all going to work. There's probably some truth in that. It probably will work to some degree. Like if they figure it out and they want to spend that kind of time and do that, that's nothing we can do about, right? We gave them the tools to make that happen. So the question then becomes, well, how do we make money? how do I put food on people's tables if we're going to end up doing that every time? Like, we're going to give you this kernel of knowledge and then you're going to go off and figure it out on your own. And the answer is the industry's changing, right? We have to be able to figure out how to become relevant or stay relevant in an industry that's really changing. And again, consulting is no different than anything else. Ethically, I think it's ethical I think you have to be ethical. I think if I had a tool in the conversation, I should announce that. I ran across a LinkedIn posting maybe it was even over the weekend, where a prominent, marketing person from an agency, it just happens to be marketing, it could be anybody, said she's not allowing AI agents in her calls, period. End of story, right? And whether it's note takers, it doesn't matter, not allowing them. And she got a lot of flack in comments back. It's basically, you're not allowing me to be more efficient or more effective. She's like, no, you're stealing everything. You're stealing all my information. You're literally stealing it. And then you're parroting it back to me, or worse, because she was on the B2B side. So you're stealing it and you're not allowing me you're not paying me for that information. And the value of that is not just the value of doing business. Now you're actually literally stealing from me, and you're not giving me the chance to even earn the income that I need to earn, let alone run a business. So I do think that we are I won't say precarious. I think most people, I'm probably a little bit wishful thinking on this, but most people, I think, are trying to do the right things. They're trying to live ethically. They're trying to some degree, but when it comes down to money, and that's where it always comes down to, right? When it comes down to money, and whether that's $10,000 or $10 million or $100 million, it doesn't matter. When it comes down to money, someone is always going to take a shortcut to save a few dollars, and it's anything from $1 to $1 million and then some, and it's going to happen. So I'd like to believe that we should have some standards. There should be some ethical standards required for interaction, but it's going to come at the price of distancing oneself from their competition. And I think it's going to be on the backs of every CEO, to every CIO, to every customer service person, to come to terms with that idea and figure out how best to use it.
Yeah, actually, that's a wishful thinking I have as well. But I think the temptation is quite high, especially now when you have so many devices. I've seen recently an ad here in the UK where it's a little pig, and it actually records everything you're talking with anyone that's around you, and they're selling materials where around the fact that you use it, you go to events, where you attend multiple tracks. You don't need to take notes, and it's going to transcribe everything for you and so on. And I was thinking, those events, their price, if you're doing that, if you're coming in with AI, any device, any phone or whatever, the price you as a person you are paying for attending that event, it should be 20 times more.
Absolutely. It should be at least
Right.
more, right? Because yeah, I totally agree.
Because you take that content and that's it. Like the way the events industry for tech it's created today, it wouldn't be sustainable. It wouldn't be sustainable for the companies. It
Well,
wouldn't be
yeah.
sustainable for anyone really in the old model if we bring AI to the table.
So I agree, except I think you have the other problem, which is if you look at something like, and again, I'm going to use AWS because it's what I work with every day. If you look at AWS reInvent, right? reInvent is AWS's, customer and partner conference. Last year it was somewhere in the vicinity of 100,000 people or it was actually not quite that high, but it was 70,000 people or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money that they're already pulling in. Then to say that, you're taking an education track or something and in order to maximize your time there and your investment, you're only spending, I don't know, $2,000 or $2,500 maybe. Not only, but if you're spending $2,500 for that, but you're able to deploy a bot to 5 tracks, now in theory, you're doing 5 times the work for that same dollar. So you should be spending $10,000, $11,000, $15,000.
Yeah.
However, that's also not sustainable, right? Because how many people are going to spend 15,000?
I think that's a different sort of event than the ones I was thinking
Sure.
about
No, I
because
bring
that's
up for,
educational, right? Like all the participants there,
yeah.
the tech community, the business community works with AWS and they learn. It's more like an educational sort of event. I was thinking more about those events where you literally pay and you
Mhm,
go and watch multiple companies that they
mhm.
are not necessarily working for AWS or with AWS. They're just
No, I understand.
a themed industry event where you have a lineup of 20, 50, or even 100 speakers for 2, 3, 5 days. You have the CEO from a large fast consuming goods brand talking about his vision and his strategy. Maybe he's going to drop some hints, right, about his strategy, about what he wants to do in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years, how they are embracing AI. And maybe you have the HR global director from another company that drops some information into, because you can, even listening people, like listening to their talks, you can humanly, you can anticipate on their train of thoughts, which are their ideas and all of that. So if you gather all of that content, that was sort of the event. For AWS, for the reInvent, probably it's a must to have something like that because I've been there a few years ago when once again Reply won the partner, EMEA Partner of the Year award, of course. And it was overwhelming, honestly, because there was so much content and so much information. Yeah, I feel like I could have used some AI
Well, sure.
to take
Well, that's why I
notes.
brought it up. I actually brought it up for both reasons, right? One is that you're right; it is overwhelming. It can be massively consuming, and frankly, the way that it's structured. And I brought it up for the same reason, just in a different way. The way that it's structured right now, you can't. I mean, like as an example, if I wanted to go and unfortunately, I just don't get a chance to take tracks anymore because I'm too busy on the business front. But I mean, if you wanted to go take an AI or Gen AI track and a data track or something, there's overlapping things that enhance each other, but they're also scheduled at the same time. So you can't necessarily even physically be in one. That's where it might be helpful. So there's a pricing model, I think, that can allow for that. But it's still a similar idea because again, if you create a pricing model that says, okay, bring your AI agent, well, then you have to create a model that says, okay, every time that agent hits something, the track or course or whatever, there's a charge for that, and you have to be able to pay for it. So your point's well taken. I fully appreciate your example. I think it's not unique though to that situation. I think a place like reInvent or Microsoft's worldwide partner conference, any of these big giant conferences that have hundreds of thousands of people at them, with a large portion of them taking educational tracks and consuming data from coursework, which is where these companies make a lot of money. you're going to price people out if you create this tiered pricing model where you have your agent involved. So we're at this inflection point, I think, is really what we're trying to get at here, between how do you price for the value of the experience, value of the engagement, the value of the conference, the value of the event, and how do you ethically pay people who are, or give that the people who are presenting at those events their worth, right? You are, in one sense, you are being more efficient. It is more effective, and it's good to be able to do that. And you're consuming that content later, so the eventual consumption of that content is happening in theory. But you're not engaging with that audience. You're not engaging with the people. You're not really giving them the due that they deserve. You're not giving them the interaction that they need, or you're not interacting with them. So again, we're at this inflection point of how far do you go in demanding a different commercial exchange versus the exchange of information. And I don't have the answer. I actually don't. I think about this too quite a bit.
I've done an analysis at global level with the AI, so data, machine learning, AI, generative AI events. Why I've done that? Because I'm going to launch a series of AI events, and I went a bit overboard by reaching out to people that actually attended those events for feedback. It wasn't just AWS; it was different AI events. They were promoted different price points and so on. Now, one interesting learning was that for the hybrid ones, so the ones that were in person, but you were able to attend digitally, the price for the digital one, the digital access was much, much, much lower than the in-person, which in theory makes sense because, of course, the venue, everything that's on site, right? The cost.
Mm-hmm.
But now, based on our conversation, I'm starting to think more about that because if the event is digital, if you are accessing that content digitally, and more than that, you have access to it for 30 days, 90 days, or whatever, sometimes even 6 months, right? Being at home, it's even more easier to record, to get that information and transcribe it with ease. So probably the pricing for digital should be at a different price point. But this is, I entered the a human agentic overthinking mode right now.
Well, but I struggle with that too. I mean, that's what I was kind of getting at. I struggle with that idea too, because on one hand, so and again, I overthink it, as I probably have most of this conversation to some degree, I suppose. But, where I struggle with is the value proposition of information in general, right? Is information, doesn't have a value, doesn't have a real value, or should it be accessible to all and available to all? And we have to figure out a different way to value something, whether it's the output or the outcome or the time, whatever. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I struggle with that all the time because on one hand, to your point, I want to see I don't want to see the industry stifled because of tooling and technology being challenged and being pushed back because it's either too invasive or something else. On the other hand, I don't want it to completely eliminate the ethical boundaries that we all needed to have, which is going to happen. So that's the other part of me is I would call myself probably a realistic pessimist or a pessimistic realist. We can talk about all this in terms of ethics and things like that. The reality is that there will be somebody, and it's already happening. There'll be somebody out there who will completely eliminate the line of ethics. They just don't care.
Yeah.
They don't have to care, whether it's because they have market share or something else. And then they'll be reinventing what ethics is. They'll state what the ethics are. They'll state what reality is. They'll state, and again, I don't mean to be fatalistic here, but I don't have the answers to this. That's why there's large forums on this. That's why a lot smarter people than me are sitting around in think tanks trying to figure this out, because I do think we're at an inflection point, as I said before, between the effective use of AI across business, across technology, across humanity, and the ethical use of that AI for the overarching good of all those things. Because the problem with the overarching good for all those things is that someone has to determine what that is. And we as people, as consumers, as thoughtful leaders in this space, we have our ideas and they could be very much right. But if they don't make money, or if they don't make enough money, or they don't provide visibility or any number of things, right, then we're kind of fooling ourselves. And, again, I don't necessarily always give Elon a lot of credit, but I think Elon may have gotten this one right a little bit in the sense that, he saw that future coming, and instead of wanting to work with others to make it more egalitarian, he just wanted to control it. He recognized the future and he wanted to control it because he has the resources and tools to do that. I think that's where, again, that's a little bit, again, out there and kind of esoteric land, but I think we're approaching that topic faster than I think people realize.
Let's switch a bit gears and think about the leaders listening. I know there are many C-level people listening to us. I received some really nice feedback. Thank you very much for that. Keep them coming. I need some energy to keep this show going. So beyond the technology itself, for our leaders listening, what strategic considerations should they have when they are starting on their cloud first AI transformation initiative? Day one, at the very beginning?
Well, it might be a little heretical, but I think it's the people. To me, it's always it's the people, right? It's the people in the organization that have been doing the work of the organization for as long as they have. It's the pockets of tribal knowledge that aren't easily discernible through tools. For lack of a better term, it's the humanizing of the technology. It's the people, stupid, as you might want to say, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to shepherd in the new paradigm. They're the ones who are going to make the transition more effective. They're the ones who are going to either embrace the change and go with it to make it useful, or they're going to resist the change and they're going to be no longer necessary or needed, or worse, combative. So it's always the people. And, on one hand, as a consultant, that's easy for me to say, but, as a technologist, I've always been in the position of having to put new technology into places where people didn't want it, didn't know what they wanted, didn't know about it, didn't understand it, or didn't want to make changes to accommodate it. And so the technology is a giant change management exercise. And AI is no different. Change management always starts out with the people. What's the roles? What's the responsibility? What are the inputs and outputs? What are the outcomes? Right? All those things. I think that a reasonable understanding of the business and the business architecture is key to making this successful. On the other hand, on the other side, right? It's a sort of a yin and yang situation. I think you have to have all that information, that knowledge, to make it effective. But you can't wait for that to happen to start something, right? And so, I think intuitively, most leaders know where the weaknesses are in their business, whether it's in their business process or their people or their product or sale, whatever it is, right? They know where those weaknesses are. The question then becomes, what can I do to improve that situation? And what can I do to quickly just start gaining ground? Because yes, there has to be sort of a strategic look from a top-down perspective. What am I doing? How am I going to do it? Where's my opportunity? But there's also a bottom up. The people who do the thing every day, they know where the problems are. They know where the weaknesses are. They know where the opportunities are. And so I think you have to do both at the same time, and you have to do a parallel task. You have to understand where you're going to make changes to the business, where you want to go as a business holistically, and what you're willing to commit to doing that. And then you also have to know where your business is doing today and where you can make quick improvements to get quick wins, to understand and build success that furthers adoption, that furthers all the change elements that we just talked about. Sorry, it's a long
find a way to balance the innovation with the risk management.
Well, I think you have to do both. I mean, you have to do both. You can't, and the other thing too, and I see a lot, again, I see a lot of content on LinkedIn, and I don't put a lot of stuff out there, frankly, because, people got to it before me. So it looks all derivative. But I would say, you have to do both, and you have to do them both well. It means you have to be willing to take a risk. You have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to make investments in tools to do something, whether it's grow revenue, grow market share, reduce costs, whatever the case is, right? But at the same time, I have to start at the lower rungs of the ladder, so to speak, to where I know, where my people know we can eliminate redundancy, we can eliminate waste, we can improve speed or efficiency of process, and then keep tabs on that, tweak those things as they go, make them and they will continue to grow. The top down strategy will come together, and they'll come together in the middle, and it won't be all the same. I mean, it'll all have to be tweaked along the way. It won't be, it's not like you're going to write the blueprint. That's the other thing too, as we talked a little bit about before. The idea of writing the blueprint and executing the blueprint, fantasy. We're in a period of time, and people call it agile business. I believe in that term. We're in a period of time where, and again, pardon me for being esoteric, but back in the late 90s and early 2000s, for those of us who were in the business, there was this term innovation center that was being bandied about by everybody. Everybody built innovation centers. We're going to build these giant innovation centers, and they're going to be the greatest things since sliced bread. And we're going to learn all kinds of things. And to some degree, those things really did work, and some degrees they didn't work, right? They were just giant, sort of black holes of cost you just threw money into, and it just went somewhere and things were supposed to happen. I do think that there's a need for an alignment to what I would call an innovation center. But an innovation center is no longer a big physical department with a bunch of people in it, or a structure with a bunch of people in it. It's a series of guidelines and rules, like a center of excellence almost, that we have to keep tweaking. We have to keep tweaking it every step of the way, so that where you started on either end and got to the middle, it isn't going to look the same. And that's okay, because that means we've done the hard work in being introspective. We've done the hard work of being, challenging ourselves, and we've done the hard work of making the changes needed to get to the outcomes we were trying to achieve in the first place.
Back to the leaders audience, what organizational structures and processes do you think they should implement to ensure that they actually have a successful AI-driven digital transformation?
Well, again, AI is built on data. I mean, data is data is data is data. And I don't mean to make light of data, but if you don't have a data officer or someone who's responsible for ensuring that data is accessible, is available, is the right data, is managed, all that sort of thing. That comes under a number of different guises. That sometimes comes under a CIO, it comes under a, marketing. There's a number of different places it comes from. Someone has to own it. There has to be a single owner of data. And that person has to be able to affect change quickly, right? So the other thing, kind of going back to what we were talking about before about sort of legacy structure, is that there's the giant data warehouses and the various things that go with that. Those also have to become more nimble and fluid, right? They have to become more accessible more easily by various things. And even if you look at companies like Teradata, who for decades made appliances and things like that, even they're changing the way that they do business, because they recognize that, they're not in the business of necessarily selling data appliances anymore. They're in the business of selling data access and data accessibility, right? So there has to be someone who's responsible for data, period, end of story. I think that ultimately has to happen. And that person has to be elevated to a level at the executive level, because effectively they have to know how, for example, a marketing engine wants to use data that is driven and created by a manufacturing engine, for example, for looking at a manufacturing. So there's got to be there's got to be someone looking at those things holistically and in real time, because as we said before, right, things are moving quickly and more quickly than ever. There has to be also, I think, again, a concerted group of people at the executive level who understand how to use data effectively and know how to use data in conjunction with each other. As I said before, if you have a marketing entity, that marketing entity has usually, if you have an internal marketing function, the internal marketing function usually is going and doing interviews with product owners and other people to create content and all these other things, right? That whole chain of activity has to become more fluid, has to become more dynamic, and it has to become really available from, again, the lowest rung of the ladder to the highest rung of the ladder. Everybody's got to have access to it and visibility to it. That means that if, someone on the front lines has an idea, that idea needs to be translated through to business outcomes as fast as possible, because that's, again, how you're going to differentiate yourself from your customer base, or from your competitor base, excuse me. Everybody in the company, especially as the companies get smaller, because less people are having to do the work, because AI is taking over more of that responsibility. And now they have to mine those people for better ideas. But, it has to become more of a, again, I hate to use the word egalitarian, but kind of egalitarian approach. Everybody has to contribute. We have to know what their value is. We have to know how they contribute, and they have to be able to do that in a very, very thoughtful and meaningful way. So what does that mean? It means we have to look at our organizational structure. We have to certainly bring data to the forefront. We have to take a leadership position and say, okay, everybody in this sort of executive level has to be able to work with each other at a moment's notice, right? We can't have silos anymore, because silos are only just going to stifle growth. They're going to stifle innovation. They're going to stifle process. We have to have this sort of, again, agile way of looking at things. And not because I'm a technologist, I've always believed this. Companies have to really use the idea of Scrum and agile development as how they run businesses, right? Should it be every 15-minute stand-up every morning? Maybe not, but, should have a forum that is constant. You should have a set of dashboards that are internal dashboards that are obvious, that everybody can see, so that everybody knows where we're trying to go. Now, obviously, there are competitive things, and we don't want to give away the farm for everything, but there needs to be a way to do that in an entity so that they can evolve as they need to, as fast as possible, to meet the needs of their customers. And, I don't know that there's a single formula for that.
So looking at the future of work, how do you think leaders should prepare their organizations for AI and automation? And this question is, I wanted to ask you this more around the workforce, how the workforce planning should look like, and what skills they should take into account.
Yeah, so I didn't mention in the last answer about IT. I mean, of course, IT has to be in the conversation too. But what I think IT becomes, and it's relevant to this question, I think IT becomes what I would call an ultimate service broker. Right. So instead of IT necessarily having to spend a great deal of time, I mean, yes, you still have to spend time on managing devices and workforce things and that sort of stuff. But what ends up happening is eventually IT becomes this service broker model, where they're just simply an interface to back end services that are being provided by someone else or something else. Right. And so what does that mean? That means that as a workforce, to answer this question, we have to, one, know what AI is. We have to understand AI in how AI is applied both to business in general and to our respective businesses, whatever they are. We have to know that intrinsically. We have to know that directly. And so how does that happen? Well, it happens because, again, over time, what will happen is that workforce will shrink. It'll shrink to a series of resources that are primarily, again, either like product managers or service managers, or someone who is responsible for a process step. That process step has a set of tools and capabilities and outputs, right? And it becomes the responsibility of that individual to make sure the outputs are the right outputs with the right time, at the right efficiency, with all the rest of the sort of holistic thing in mind. So what does that mean? That means that as a workforce, we have to get more educated on AI, what it does, how it does it, how much it costs, why it costs, where can we find efficiencies? Because at some point in time, right, we're still in the process of understanding AI and how it works. We're going to come to a maturity level with that, and we need to then go to the next step, which is, how do I make the thing more efficient, reduce cost, right? All those sorts of things. So we have to be able to have that mindset, because not everybody has that mindset. Right. Especially today, we have, workforces that are still fairly large. They're very complex. They do, and they're very, very niche oriented in a lot of cases. I have 5 people who, and again, not to pick on data scientists, but I'm going to pick on data scientists for a second. I've got 5 data scientists sitting around trying to figure out a problem. Well, that there's a certain amount of cost that goes with that. That cost is not trivial. That means that either I invest in them and I find other ways, or I invest in tools that then reduce their need from 5 to 3 to 2 to 1. And again, I don't want to pick on data scientists too much because I love data scientists. I love data people, but it's not unique. It's every role is going to have this problem, which is we're going to reduce the requirement for a human in the process step. So what's going to bubble up to the top is the humans that are capable, that are flexible, that can adapt, all the things. And so when I talk with executives about, well, what is the workforce going to look like? Who are your best and brightest people? Because ultimately they're going to be the ones who are going to rise to the occasion. Yes, there's a technology problem. Yes, there's a technology literacy problem, but most of the time that's solved by employing the right people first and the smart people first. Smart doesn't necessarily mean that they know the technology. It means they know how to find the answer. And that's, I think, what you're going to see. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Dave. So you already explained what digital twins are. I wanted us to circle back to that topic and explain, especially to leaders, why they represent such an important opportunity for businesses.
Well, I think the initial opportunity is fairly straightforward, which is I can do more with less people, right? I mean, that's, not to be trivial about it, but I can execute more output of whatever my processes are, whatever my business is, by using digital versions of people and digital versions of people in roles. So as an example, and let's just, again, to be really, really, kind of down in the weeds. I've got a shipping clerk. Spends most of their time taking inventory from one place and putting it on a shipping dock to be sent out to wherever it goes, right? Or they're responsible for sitting in front of a computer all day and tracking shipments through whatever services are being used, whether it's a third-party service or their trucking service or whatever, logistics, whatever the case is, right? That's what they're doing. Now, how much does that person make? That person makes, I don't know, maybe $80,000 a year. I'm just making this up to make it easy numbers. Can I put a tool in, a digital twin, to do that? Yes. But then do I want to just eliminate the knowledge of that individual who's been working here for 10, 15 years? No. So how do I do it that I actually make them a steward of the business? I make that human the steward of the process, steward of the business, and then I have them involved in the process to make the digital twin function better and more effectively, right? So ultimately, what digital twins are going to do is they're going to do the work that is not the work that people really want to do at the end of the day. I mean, yes, I'm sure there are people who want to be shipping parts. I know, I know some, but at the end of the day, what they really want is they want to be able to make a certain amount of money to live on and go to work for a certain period of time and have someone else do all the heavy lifting while they can actually, either take a step back or reduce their need to be focused on a particular topic or thing. And again, if making them stewards of the business, that's kind of, again, a very trite way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, I think that's what business leaders need to know, is that if we take humans and we give their digital twins the role that those humans had, let's not just eliminate the human. Let's take the human and give them the responsibility and the accountability for the process and process step. And then we can deploy the army of robots, so to speak. That's kind of what I look at and how I think we should look at it. That's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen even maybe a month from now, maybe in a year from now. But the long-term strategy is going to be, if I don't need humans in a process, I don't have humans in a process. And that's a lot. There's a lot of process that don't need humans. My father, who is retired, he's been retired 5 times now, by the way. He's 83 and he's still working, some degree. My father's a Kanban expert. He, one of the first people in the U.S. ever trained in Kanban from Toyota and the 9 yards.
Wow.
Oh yeah, he's a Kanban expert. And and I was over there for a post birthday. My birthday was a couple weeks ago, so I was over there for a post birthday dinner.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
I missed that. Sorry.
21, you can
Sorry,
tell.
I missed that.
I'm 21 now. Yeah, finally, I'm an adult.
You can have alcohol in the US, right?
Yes, I can. My father, we're talking about these topics in general terms, because my father was an industrial engineer, came from that world. And the first thing he said was, well, 95% of all processes is waste. And I went, I sat there and I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's probably true. I mean, I know that's what Toyota used to say, and Kanban, and the idea of manufacturing process is very heavy, people and very heavy, wasteful, and very inefficient for the most part. That's probably true. And honestly, it's probably true about most processes. If we really sat down and did the time, which is itself possibly wasteful, but did the time, we would find that we would pull out a great deal of waste in process. And in the case of information workers, that's a very human thing. A lot of human in the information works. Eventually, as I said, there will be a point in time where, humans will be the exception, not the rule. And the humans that are in the rule then are the ones who are accountable for the robot army.
Snow Reply has done multiple projects with digital twin before people knew what digital twin is, actually, I
Sure.
think. So I wanted to ask you if it's possible to share some of the outcomes from those real world scenarios. If that's, of course, public information and you're allowed to share.
Yeah, I don't know that I can share exact outputs. I think that's probably a little bit off the mark, but we have done quite a bit of work in really a number of industries. So manufacturing being one of them. We did a lot of work in the German car industry, particularly with this capability. We've done some work in marketing and advertising in Italy and here in the US, as well as the UK, where, again, we've created these. I can talk about the marketing one because it's a little closer to home for me.
Yeah.
Where we've taken, as I said, we built a platform that took a human, and again, we helped them identify what do humans do in this loop? Like, how does this actually work? We literally broke the process down on a whiteboard with sticky notes. Like, here's the step, here's the inputs, here's the outputs, here's who this goes to, here's who this goes to. Recreated all of that process in automation, used, again, a Gen AI prompting mechanism with a series of sort of tweaks and retries to really hone the prompt engineer, if you will, put it through the system, right, and have it come out in the outputs, have someone check the output to make sure that it's not hallucinating or anything else, and send it to print, right? That digital twin was really the digital twins, I should say, in air quotes, because every step of that process would have had 2 or 3 people involved. Now there's one person or two twins involved, and those other people have stepped back and are doing other things in the business. So what does that mean? We've reduced cycle time in that case from weeks to hours. We've reduced overhead, because again, if you look at the cost of a human doing that work and assuming that they're doing it only, that's all they're doing, to having a automated process do that work, we've reduced the cost of process to almost nothing. It's not nothing, but it's still a very, very minimal as compared to consuming 3 to 4 people, all for just that one thing. And then we've improved delivery time. That's the other big thing, right? So that improves customer experience. So the customer has gotten a better experience because we improved delivery time on their content to the point where they can see results faster, which of course improves their ROI. So, again, I don't have definitive numbers to give you. I can tell you hours to weeks and that sort of thing, weeks to hours, just because that I could share with you. But in general terms, right, we're seeing an overall reduction in cycle time, reduction in cost, and a reduction, increase in efficiency and speed.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Before we wrap up, I have a series of rapid fire questions
All right, let's do it.
to give our listeners some quick, actionable insights. Most important factor for successful cloud first AI transformation.
Start somewhere.
Just start.
Because it's, again, not to be trite, but start somewhere because you know where to start. Everybody knows where to start. They just don't always know how to start. Start somewhere.
Biggest mistake organizations make when approaching digital transformation.
Trying to figure it all out before they start, and we're guilty of that too as a consulting industry, right? I used to call it the shining city on the hill. We're guilty of that, right? There always has to be a vision. Visions are visions, and that's important. But if you're waiting around to figure it all out before you do something, you've already missed the boat and you're sitting on the dock.
Most undervalued aspect of cloud computing for AI applications.
Data transformation. And the reason I say that is because, again, there's a lot of data in organizations. Organizations have mountains of data and they're only getting more data every step of the way. The ability to transform that data and make it relevant and useful, whether it's structured, unstructured, it doesn't matter. That's where the energy and attention needs to be paid first, because that will then turn into dollars and cents down the road.
Excellent. Most promising application area for digital twins?
Software engineering, product engineering, and or process engineering. So essentially digital twins taking the roles of software engineer, product engineer, or internal process engineer in real time so that they're constantly evolving and they're constantly creating new things based on inputs from the rest of the business.
Best way to get started with AI if you're not a technical organization?
Well, I mean, again, most folks use ChatGPT. They use Claude as apps on their phones. I think it's a great way to get started because you can do a lot just there alone, right? I mean, you can write with Claude. You can write whole applications now by just simply giving it prompts in your phone. So that's a good place to start. I think the other places I would look would be the free documentation from everybody. I mean, whether it's AWS or Google or N8N or whomever. I mean, there's there's documentation everywhere that gives you a reasonable amount of information, understanding about AI and how it works and why it works. Of course, it's evolving and changing every day, but that's a place to start.
Most important consideration when selecting cloud and AI partners?
Well, hopefully they're good people because as we kind of talked about before, right, there's an ethical aspect to all of this that I think is often, I wouldn't say it's overlooked. It's just sort of thrown under the rug for right now. The partnership angle really is key. I think is going to invest in your business. Um, because at the end of the day, you're consuming those capabilities and tools to better your business. And so you're making an investment in those people or things, and they should be making an investment in you. That includes the cloud providers. That includes, companies like mine. We all need to work together and be responsible for each other's outcomes. And directly. And I think that's a change, especially in the consulting model that is starting to bear fruit is partners like us coming to work with companies, taking ownership stake in their outcomes.
One trend, that's the last one, I promise you, one trend that will define the future of enterprise AI.
So again, like most technology industries, I think the industry is going to consolidate over the course of time. Right now, it's still, again, it's in the trough of disillusionment, right? So there's everybody out there with their AI company and they're all trying to vie for your business and for your attention. There will be a series of consolidating efforts over the course of time. And it's not surprisingly likely going to be the big cloud providers because again, they have the tools, they have the resources, and more importantly, they have the money to do that. The trend, I think, however, will be niche players coming to bear on very, very specific topics or very specific problems, and then they'll be consumed quickly by a large cloud provider. And so the trend I think you're going to see, at least for a while, is consolidation. Then I think it's going to be efficiency, and then I think it's going to be cost reduction as these tools become truly ubiquitous, and we have to look at other ways to create value.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. This has been incredibly insightful. Such a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast. I know we discussed about it for a couple of months now.
Thank you for having me.
We had a really insightful conversation about the intersection of cloud computing, AI, and digital transformation. Also, the work you're doing at Storm Reply to help organizations navigate those complex technologies is clearly making a significant impact. Where can our listeners learn more about your work, about Storm Reply, and connect with you?
Sure. I mean, you can reach us at reply.com. That's www.reply.com. That's where you can first find out about us. And of course, Storm as a business unit is there. You're also welcome to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We have several channels. Storm Reply is our main channel for all of our Storm business entities around the world. And of course, you're welcome to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or reach out to me directly through my email at d.ducat@reply.com.
Any final thoughts or calls to action for our audience about embracing the cloud-first AI transformation?
Well, thank you. I didn't sell anything in this discussion, but I would love to sell the fact that we're here to help you. I mean, obviously, Storm Reply, we are here to help you in earnest, right? We do AWS. That's not all we do.
You do Microsoft as well.
We do a variety of capabilities at Storm.
Yeah.
Reply does everything, and we can get you with partners if we don't do it. But I say that in sort of tongue in cheek a little bit because there is a lot out there. I mean, if you open up LinkedIn today, you'll see everybody and their brother's uncle talking about AI strategy, agentic AI. I've got colleagues who run AI based companies, and that's all they do is they do AI consulting, and I appreciate that, and that's great, and that's what they do. The reality is that there's a lot of noise in the market. There's not necessarily a lot of output in the market, and we'd like to help you make it real. Our goal is to make it real with you, not to you, but with you. And we'd love to have the chance to do that. And that's my call to action to you is recognize that AI is here. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We'd love to help you figure that out. If we don't have the answers, we'll help you figure them out. And looking forward to that opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Your insights on cloud-first strategies, digital twins, future of AI and business have been super invaluable. Always a pleasure seeing you, talking with you, learning from your experience and wisdom. To our listeners, please remember that digital transformation isn't about the technology alone. As Dave mentioned, it's about people. It's about reimagining how your business works, how your business can create value in a world where AI and cloud computing makes new possibilities a reality. Don't forget to subscribe to AI Everywhere Leaders podcast for more insights on real-world AI applications and leadership strategies. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your network, leave me a review, and send me a message if you like a specific topic to be addressed. Until next time, keep exploring the possibilities of AI and remember that the future belongs to organizations that can harness the intelligent infrastructure with humans to create extraordinary business outcomes. Until next time.